It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Welcome to episode number 568 of Rico Brogna. I got to tell you, as lousy as the season was, and we are still picking up the remnants, the damages from the 2025 collapse of a season. Every time I watch the Jets, or I think about the Brooklyn Nets, or I watch one of the two games the Islanders have played this season, I remind myself that as bad as the Mets season was, Rico Brogna is like therapy, because thinking about next year is actually exciting, especially compared to the other crap I have to watch as a sports fan. So hopefully that therapy works for you as well. We have a lot of things to cover on episode 568. Mike Puma had some good reporting on what Pete Alonso and Scott Boras may be asking for in free agency. We will get to that. Some seedlings were dropped on the possibilities of two legit aces in Tarek Skubal and Hunter Green being available during this offseason. We will discuss that. Eric Chavez's interesting comments about Juan Soto. And then, of course, we will grade the premium relievers that the Mets employed in 2025. It's a part of our series of grading every single person that played for the Mets in 2025. So if you've missed any of it, you could go back into the archives in episode 566, 567, where we graded the Syracuse train. That was all the relievers that went up, down with the Mets throughout the year. If you go back an episode prior to that, we graded all the starting pitchers. And before that, we did the position players. And people are still emailing me about my Luis Torrens grade. That was pleasing to some and pissing off others. Bottom line is I gave him an A. He's the one position player I gave an A to. Didn't give one to Alonso, didn't give one to Soto, didn't give one to Lindor, but I gave one to Torrens. And if you have an issue with that, go back to episode, I think it's 565, and you can check out my explanation. But let's get to Pete Alonso. This is obviously going to be one of the biggest stories of the offseason, not just throughout Major League Baseball, but for us as Met fans, and that is Pete Alonso's free agency. So Mike Puma was really the first reporter to give us any kind of insight on what Pete is thinking about, what the Mets are thinking about, what Scott Boras is thinking about. And here are the headlines from an article that I do advise everybody read in the New York Post, and that is Pete Alonso and Scott Boras are going to ask for at least 7 years. I am not surprised by that. I think when you factor in that Pete had a very good year, he was bitter about free agency. I think that was obvious. He and Scott Boras are going to try to use this offseason as a let's get ours back now. We're coming off a big year. We don't have the qualifying offer attached to us. Let's go to town. And so my reaction to this is twofold. Whenever we talk about what a player is worth or how many years they should give, it's such a conflicting conversation. And what I mean by that is if you ask me point blank, knowing other contracts, knowing Pete as a player, knowing his age, if you just said point blank, Evan, is Pete Alonso worth a 7-year contract? My answer is obviously going to be no. I think about what he would look like in year 5, in year 6. You could even argue what he'd look like in year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7. So I am not going to argue, nor can anyone, the kind of merits of just giving Pete Alonso a 7-year contract. So on one side, I hear this demand, and I rationally tell you, wow, that's crazy. Boy, how could the Mets give Pete Alonso a 7-year contract? The other part of me is reminded that as of this podcast and as of this year, because things can change when the CBA expires, but as of right now, there's no salary cap. And as long as there's no, real quick, because I know somebody's listening and they're screaming at their radio or their phone or their computer and they're saying, but Evan, there is a salary cap. What about the competitive balance tax? What about the premiums you pay in finances, in international bonus money, in draft pick compensation? I get it. There are penalties to spending a lot of money. We all understand that. We acknowledge it. It is not a salary cap. A salary cap is what we have in the NFL. A salary cap is what we have in the NBA. when Sean Marks debates paying Cam Thomas, a part of it is, hey, when I build a team 3 years from now that's worth half a beans, is it really worth it to have this one player who doesn't defend on a consistent level make $27 million, which makes up a big part of my cap? That's not existing in baseball. So as long as it doesn't exist, I have a very difficult time. As much as I acknowledge, I don't want you to forget the first part. Yes, 7 years for Pete Alonso is crazy. I get it. I'm not disputing that. But I have a very difficult time coming on the fan or this podcast and screaming and yelling that you can't give him 7 years and $30 million a year. Because at the end of the day, the penalties are what? Look, the Mets are going to be paying in the luxury tax probably forever. I would assume so, unless something crazy happens. Even if they develop so many good young players, eventually you have to pay some of those really good young players. And I believe that as long as Steve Cohen owns the Mets and he's trying to win and he's trying to chase a championship, he's going to spend money. So that's where I get conflicted. Like, if you told me tomorrow, and this isn't going to happen, but you told me tomorrow the Mets and Pete Alonso have agreed to a 7-year contract and they're going to pay him, $30 million a year. Yeah, if you asked me to break down the merits of that contract, I'd say, boy, that's risky. That's crazy. But at the end of the day, there is no salary cap. You have an owner that's a billionaire, and we live a year at a time. And I want to give you an example of where I think this point, if you're not getting it yet, and you're like, come on, Evan, that doesn't make any sense. Either you want to pay him or you don't want to pay him. I want to bring up the Yankees for a second. We all watch the Yankees. Max Fried. I think that's a great example. When Max Fried signed an 8-year contract, did we not all think to ourselves, what the hell is that going to look like at the end of the deal? And when you combine that with the fact that they've got other starting pitchers making a lot of money deep into their 30s, we could sit around and worry about 2029 all day, but the Yankees made a decision. You know what? We need the player. We think this player is perfect for us. Let's go a little bit above and beyond to make sure we get the player, even if the contract on the surface sounds crazy. So here's my bottom line on Pete Alonso and his demands and what I'd be willing to give him. And if you listen back to a year ago, I pretty much said the same thing. When he gets a great offer, when he gets that mega offer, it's probably in the Mets' best interest to match it and bring him back. But what they did last year, and this is where Hoff and I yelled at each other and we disagreed, was don't overbid just because you're emotional. Like, as emotional as I am, I never said just shut up and give a 6-year contract. They handled it right last year. They said to Pete, you know what? When you get a big offer, you come back to us. And you always have to make sure that you have that ability for him to come back to you, because that's not what happened in the DeGrom case. My understanding is that Texas said to Jacob DeGrom, if you take this offer back to the Mets or anywhere else, it's gone. So obviously there is some danger to that, saying, hey, let's get last and final. But I do think, and I do believe, Pete, that he wants to be back. He'd prefer to be back, but he wants his respect. He wants his years and he wants his money. So last year, my feeling on the whole free agency was sit back and wait. If you have to give in on a contract you're not comfortable with, you're still better off doing it. And we're going to spend a lot of time breaking down the options, the replacements. We touched a little bit on Kyle Schwarber on the last edition of the Rico. I still think at the end of the day, the Mets' best option to succeeding in 2026 and beyond is to keep Pete Alonso. So it's a danger zone. If the Cincinnati Reds are willing to give him a 7-year contract, does that mean I say, let's just match it? I kind of lean towards it, as crazy as that contract will seem on the surface. Now, the other aspect of this is, look, they gave Brandon Nimmo a really long deal, and that was to bring down his CBT. So 7-year deals are not all created equal. The Mets preferred a longer deal with Brandon Nimmo because they wanted that CBT and the average annual salary to be low. But I don't think Pete's getting 7 years. But I do think that his market is going to be more robust than it was last year. And if the Mets want to win and the Mets want to keep their fans from kind of turning on them, their best way of succeeding is having Pete Alonso on the New York Mets.
Now, you got to refresh my memory here. What was the longest contract? Was there even a contract that was like more than 4 or 5 years that the Mets offered Pete? I don't recall.
Yeah, I think the offer that initially he turned down multiple years ago, back in 2023 from Billy Epler, was a 6-year contract. Now, I'm not sure when that deal would have began. Let's assume it begins in 2024. Well, that's like the equivalent of that would be the Mets basically giving him a 3 or 4 year contract. So him getting a 7-year deal would be the ultimate win for Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. I don't think he's getting that, but I understand why he's going to ask for it. And I think that this free agency is more dangerous for the Mets because I think there will be a better market for him. And also the Mets don't have kind of the safety net they had last year. The safety net they had last year was if they lost Pete Alonso, they could tell their fans, we got you, Juan Soto. If they lose Pete Alonso this year, I mean, we're going to go over all the different alternatives. You have to replace all that offense. And you can't sell this fan base on, well, we're going to move Vientos to first base, or we believe in Ryan Clifford. Like, you're literally going to have to sell the fan base on Kyle Schwarber or Kyle Tucker or a big ticket item. And if you don't, which of course is their prerogative, I think that Steve Cohen is going to realize that his ticket sales are not going to be very high going into the year. So it's a very different spot they're in when it comes to the Alonso free agency than they were last year.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and you kind of said this. It's like, hey, if Alonso would have signed that Epler deal, this would have been like, part through year 3 of a 6-year deal or whatever it is. You know what? Like, if they come to some agreement and say Pete Alonso signs a 5-year deal, maybe a 6-year deal, whatever the case is, somewhere between 4 and 6, then what was all of last year about? Like, they couldn't go higher than 2 years. They made him a great offer. And again, it's depending on what the money is too, because last year, wasn't he one of the highest paid first basemen in the league?
Yeah, he ended up getting a high average annual salary of 30. He just didn't get the years. Here's the difference between last year and this year, Pete, though. Number one, competitors in the marketplace. Like, it never made sense to compete against yourself. And it feels, and we'll see if it turns out to be true, that there are going to be more teams bidding on him. And number two, he's coming off a better year. So when you ask what's changed, that's changed. And that's and he doesn't have the qualifying offer, which I think was unappealing to a lot of other teams. Bottom line is he's going to have a more robust market, which means you're going to have to compete with other teams. And here's the issue. So I bring up DeGrom a little bit on this. When they lost DeGrom, they instantly pivoted to Justin Verlander, with the thought being, okay, we replace DeGrom and we do it on a shorter term deal, right? Is Kyle Schwarber necessarily going to be a shorter term deal? And he's 2 years older than Pete to begin with, and he's already a DH. So even if those contracts line up, and we talked about this a couple of Ricos ago about, well, the benefit of Schwarber is he is just the DH. So then you go get someone who improves your defense at first base and you've replaced the offense of Pete. Like, I get it. But all your concerns about Alonso, you're then going to have in Kyle Schwarber, and a guy who does not play the field. And even though Pete's not a Gold Glover, there is a value in his ability to play first base, even if it's not 162 games.
Right. No, and again, like we're talking, if you and I were to sign him, I'd say, he's a first baseman. He's a 162 game first baseman. That's what he does. And what's the term? He fields every game, or what's the term that Lindor calls posts. He posts 162. Right. Woohoo! But the point is, he does. He legitimately does. So you and I see him like that. But so that's why he's gonna get paid the way he's gonna get paid. But on the other hand, too, like, legitimately, there's nobody else that's going to be able to come in and put up that production, whether it's at first base or DH, besides Kyle Schwarber.
Right. And if you do replace him with a Murakami or a Kyle Tucker, and I'm not talking position by position, I'm talking about run production, because when I say replacing Pete Alonso, I want to make this clear. It's not necessarily a first baseman. Like, it's the run production, because you may get more run production out of DH or third base or another position. So it doesn't have to be a 1-for-1 replacement of Pete. It's just, how do you replace that offense? All the other guys, and there are some appealing names out there in the free agent market. Murakami's an unknown. He's 25 years old. That's appealing. He's an unknown. We have no idea what he's going to produce at the American Major League level. And then you look at guys like Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman. Kyle Tucker, is he going to stay healthy? Like, one of the beauties of Pete is that he does play every single game. So, look, to me, if you just say, all right, Evan, what's he worth? I think you're worth what the market dictates. but that's the easy way out. It's the real answer, but it's the easy way out. Like, I'm not offering him a 7-year deal, but I'm saying if someone else is giving him a 6-year deal, you have to think, if you're Steve Cohen and the Mets, about, all right, I know it's a bad deal, but I want the player back. He gives us the best chance to win. There is that value of him possibly being a 500 home run hitter as a New York Met. You may not feel it right now, but I think it's something you will feel 3, 4, 5 years from now. Do we consider handing out a contract that we know we hate? We know we don't like it, but we want to keep the player. But if you ask me, all right, what is ultimately a fair offer for him? I think 3 or 4 years, maybe even throwing other opt-outs, even though I don't think the opt-out will benefit him because he's only getting older. And I think matching the $30 million he was making this year. So if you go on the high end, which is a 4-year deal, and you give him $30 million a year, that's $120 million. Is that getting it done today for Pete Alonso? It is not, because Pete and Scott want to test the market. So we'll keep an eye on it. The other interesting thing from Puma's article was that Pete Alonso, according to sources, and this is important, understands and acknowledges that at some point in his contract, he's going to be a DH. But it's unclear how soon Alonso would be open to such a change. I honestly, and this is just me predicting, this is me kind of surmising, knowing Pete, at least as much as I know Pete, which is not, incredibly well. I think this is about respect. I think this is about money, and this is about years. And if the Mets give him what he wants, maybe not the 7 years, but ultimately the best offer in the marketplace, I think he will come back in DH. I don't think that's going to be an impediment to him returning as a New York Met. Couple of other news and notes that we need to pay attention to. Number one, Reds general manager Nick Krall, after the Reds was eliminated, was asked many questions in his postseason press conference, in his gaggle. One of which being, you have a lot of starting pitching. And clearly the Reds do. Watching the Reds down the stretch of this season in a pennant race with us, that was their strength. I mean, they did not have a great lineup. They did not have a fearsome bullpen, but they had a rotation. So I bring this up because Nick Krall gave a couple of interesting answers. One was about trading some of the depth in his rotation. Didn't rule it out, didn't commit to it. But the answer that really stuck out with me and many in Cincinnati was being asked point blank, would you consider trading Hunter Green? His answer, I don't want to speculate on anybody that's going to get traded or not traded at this point. Now, that may sound like an innocuous answer, but to me, that's a big freaking deal. Because I think when you ask a general manager or team president about a player that is so entrenched in your future, you're going to say, no, I'm not trading him. And I'm going to give you an example. Do you guys remember, and I know I played this on the Fan. I don't think I did it here on the Rico, though I should have. Chris Young, the president, general manager, whatever his title is, of the Texas Rangers, yes, the former Met, was asked about trading DeGrom. Like, hey, if you guys fall out of it, would you trade Jake? And he could not have been more blunt in saying, no, we are not trading Jacob DeGrom, which, look, you as a fan and listener and whatever can say, I don't believe you, Chris, you're full of crap. We have a right to. But he was unequivocal in, I'm not trading him. Nick Krall, the GM of the Cincinnati Reds, basically said, I don't want to speculate when asked about Hunter Green. Now, here's the deal with Hunter Green. So we understand his contract situation because that is always the end-all be-all. Hunter Green is on an absolute bargain basement contract, which makes the idea of the Reds trading him, to me, even crazier. He makes $8 million next year. 8. He makes 15 in 2027, 16 in 2028, and then in 2029, there's a $21 million team option. So they have 4 more years of control on him. And he's young, and he's in his prime, and he's really good. Now, here's the negative with Hunter Green, because I don't want to act like he's Mr. Perfect. He's never made 30 starts in a year. Health is his biggest issue. This year, he pitched to a 2.76 ERA, dominated the New York Mets, started game 1 of the wild card series, even though it didn't go well. He only made 19 starts. The year before that, even though he pitched to a 6 WAR and a 2.75 ERA, he made 26 starts, only threw 150 innings. So the real fear with Hunter Green is, can he stay healthy? Is it possible? Is it possible that the Cincinnati Reds say, you know what? We got a guy who's 26 years old. He is on a bargain basement deal, which means everybody can be involved. I mean, throw the team out there. Why couldn't they be involved? We could get such a great return, and there is a health risk on him. Let's just cash out. I guess it's possible. Now, I will tell you this. Would I take the risk on Hunter Green? Absolutely. That is a risk worth taking. As risky as starting pitching health is, and as risky as his health is. So keep an eye on that. More on that as the weeks and months go on the Rico Brogna. But Nick Krall, the GM of the Reds, opening it up to the possibility of, maybe Hunter Green can be traded. The other guy to keep an eye on is Tarik Skubal. And that name is going to be talked about a lot more because, A, he's the best pitcher in baseball. We all witnessed his brilliance over 6 innings in Game 5 of the American League Division Series. But there are 2 things about Skubal that are really, really important to understand. Number one, he's a free agent at the end of next season. So unlike Hunter Green, who is signed long-term on a bargain basement deal, Tarik Skubal is a free agent in 1 more year. That's the first thing that we need to know. And I think everybody kind of knew that already. I'm just reiterating. The second thing you need to know about Tarik Skubal is who represents him. That person is Scott Boras, which means he is getting to free agency. Like, he is getting to free agency. You are talking about a guy who right now is 28 years old, but when he gets to free agency is essentially going to be 30 because next year is his age 29 season. And then once he hits the market, while he'll still be 29, he will be going into his age 30 season. Still reasonably young, but, it's not 27, 26. Scott Boras is not signing an extension with the Detroit Tigers. It's not happening. And he's not signing an extension with anybody. Like, I think if he got traded to us or anywhere else, I still think Scott Boras is going to say, I got my Garrett Cole of this generation. I got the best pitcher in baseball. He's a lefty. He's now proven he can do it in October. He's dependable. At least the last 2 years he's been dependable. I'm going to break the bank. I'm going to get the Garrett Cole contract again, maybe more. So I think it is a lock that Skubal's getting to free agency a year from now. But, who knows what the earth looks like a year from now? Who knows what the CBA looks like a year from now? But Skubal was asked point blank about being traded. Actually, I think it was specifically about getting a contract extension. I want to be accurate about what he was asked, but it was about getting a contract extension with Detroit. His answer was, my job is to play. That's not my job to do anything other than play. Those questions should be asked towards the front office and the people that make those decisions, but my job is to go out there and play. That answer is a Borosian answer. That is Scott Boras coaching him. That is Scott Boras saying, if anyone asks you about an extension, if anyone asks you about being traded, if anyone asks you anything, it's very easy. All you've got to do is say, not my job. I don't know anything about it. Talk to the bosses. Look, I think it's all code for he is inevitably getting to free agency. So this is not about Scott making a decision or Tarik making a decision. This is about the Tigers making a decision. This is about the Detroit Tigers who went to the postseason in back-to-back years, got knocked out in the 5th and deciding game of a division series in back-to-back years, deciding, what are we doing? Because they really have themselves, I guess it's 4 options. Option number 1 is we're going to keep him and we are going to go balls to the walls to keep him as a free agent. We're going to offer him the money that the Mets offer, the money that the Phillies, whatever big market team is involved, we're going to be right there. We are Detroit Rock City. Option number 2 is to say, you know what? We're not paying him. Let's trade him right now. Let's just trade him right now. He's got a full year left. There could be mid-market teams that say, screw it, we'll bring him in for a year, try to win a world championship, even if we don't intend on re-signing him. I think that is certainly a possibility. I mean, you can't see a team like San Diego saying, you know what? Let's acquire him. Let's go for it. We're going to lose Michael King in free agency. Go balls to the wall, try to win a championship. Option number 3 is to keep him and consider this at the trade deadline. The negative about the trade deadline is I think you lessen your value. While teams are desperate to win and teams are trying to win a championship, you eliminate half the teams in baseball. And even the really good teams are realizing, what are we getting? 8 starts out of him? 10 starts out of him? And then the other option is we don't intend on re-signing him, but we're going to try to win a championship ourselves. And we don't want to trade him. We don't want to kind of have that on our resume that we dealt him. So which road does Detroit go down? My gut is they're going to shop him and they're going to listen. And then they're ultimately going to keep him. I think they will check out the marketplace, see how crazy it gets, see how aggressive teams get, survey the land in terms of packages, because the Tigers are one of those teams, and I think the Reds are like this too, if they ever traded Hunter Green, where they are not blowing it up. They are not looking for 5 of the greatest prospects in the world that are going to help them next or 3 years from now. I think they're going to try to win now. I mean, the Reds were just in the playoffs. The Tigers have been in the playoffs in back-to-back years, so you're probably talking about more ready-made players. Now, do the Mets have that? Yeah. And should the Mets be involved in a Tarek Skubal pursuit? Absolutely. This is different than me a year ago or 2 years ago. I was very hesitant to take the booty of prospects and trade it for possibly 1 year of a starting pitcher. But I think when you look at the way this season played out, when you look at the makeup of this team, I think it's worth the risk. And I also think that specifically Skubal, not Green because he signed long-term, but in Skubal's case, he may be the exception to the David Stearns rule. The exception to we don't want to give guys long-term deals. All right, one other thing before we get to grading these relievers, and that is former Mets hitting coach Eric Chavez. I want to play you an extended clip of Eric because there's so many amazing things that he said, a few of which will excite me if you haven't heard it yet. Eric Chavez was doing an interview on the Foul Territory podcast and was talking about possibly altering the approach of Juan Soto. Take a listen to Eric Chavez, and we'll explore after we're done listening.
There were times when, and I'll just be honest, I think there were times, where myself and I even talked to Carlos was, if we could just kind of get him to swing, maybe 0-0 or some pitches that he could do damage on early in the counts. But Juan is he is a precision hitter. I wouldn't get him out of his comfort zone at all. The one thing I would say, if you want to think outside the box and get creative, Shohei Ohtani's, along with Judgy and Cal Riley, the 3 best hitters in the game. Juan's up there. Shohei leads off. Juan is so good at getting on base. He's so selective. There are times when things are going and you're in the middle of the lineup, you're 3, 4, 5, like Pete Alonso, like we know Pete's going to chase, Pete's going to do damage. I think that you're kind of referencing driving in runs at Juan could drive in 140. But instead of doing that, where you're telling him to get out of his comfort zone, slide him in the leadoff spot. He steals bases. He gets on base at a 40% clip. Don't have him get out of his comfort zone of what he likes to do, but you can be just as dynamic in the leadoff spot. If you look at Shohei and what he's done without changing the player too much, just changing where he hits in the batting lineup. Like it's, I know people, they're like, wherever you hit shouldn't really matter.
So, couple of things. I'll get to the leading off Soto part because I'm sure anyone who listens to the Rico for a long time knows that I've been asking for that for months. Eric Chavez admitting, I almost give him credit. Eric Chavez admitting that he tried to convince Juan Soto to change anything about his approach takes some kinds of stones because, well, look, as a hitter, you're never perfect. You're always looking to improve. Changing one's philosophy, especially when your philosophy is that of Juan Soto's, is probably not one you should be altering with. So he was talking about getting him to be more aggressive early in counts. I was looking at his career numbers swinging at the very first pitch of an at-bat. And keep this in mind, you can swing at the first pitch of a plate appearance and you foul the ball off or you swing and miss and it doesn't count. I'm talking about balls put in play. So obviously, yes, you swing at the first pitch, you swing and miss. That happens. But in terms of balls put in play, hitters tend to be really good hitters when they swing at the first pitch. It's why I've argued with Hoff about this when we would get on, Jeff McNeil or whomever for swinging at the first pitch. But I want to give you some perspective on Soto. His career batting average swinging at the first pitch is 426, which obviously is very high. But like I said, the league average swinging at the first pitch is also very high. I think it's like in the threes, like 320, something of that nature. But this past season with the New York Mets, he not only swung at the first pitch and put it into play one of the fewest times in his major league career, but he had by far and away the lowest batting average he ever had swinging at the first pitch. I mentioned 426 is his career average. 2018, 483. 2019, 444. 2020, I can't even count. He was 11 for 14, which is 786. 2021, 455. 2022, 333. 2023, 441. 2024 with the Yankees, 438 last year, 290. I don't know how to explain that other than to say blame Eric Chavez. Nah, I'm just kidding. I think that Juan Soto's approach of being patient is a part of his brilliance and a part of his greatness. And while we will have some critical things to say about Juan's season coming up next week when we do a deep dive on Juan Soto's 2025 season, I never felt as if he was looking for walks. And I wasn't sure if I was going to feel that way watching him for a full season. Never felt that way. I felt that he basically said, I am not reaching out of the strike zone for something that isn't a strike. And I know the strike zone. And it's borderline cocky, borderline arrogant, but he knows the strike zone. And so I don't look at that as someone who says, boy, I'm looking to walk. I don't think he's looking to walk. I think he's such a selective hitter that when he gets a pitch to hit, he tries to rip it. When he doesn't, he spits out and he walks. And if you think he's looking to walk, I ask you, what did Barry Bonds do? Because Barry Bonds, I think, was an even more patient hitter than Juan Soto was. And I never thought Barry was looking to walk. I thought Barry was basically the same idea. He had such a brilliant eye. He said, I'm not swinging at pitches that aren't strikes. And he didn't. He'd get one strike to hit a week. He'd hit over the fence. As far as Chavez's idea is concerned, I've been saying that for months. And I would do it next year. Like, the guy now steals bases. It's a new weapon in his repertoire, though I do think that number is going to come down a little bit in 2026. He gets on base at such an incredible clip. Why would you not want him starting off the top of the first inning or the bottom of the first inning 42% of the time getting on base? Why not? Why not? Gives you a greater chance to score. Now, the key is Pete being back, because if you have less guys to drive him in, my opinion may change. But assuming Alonso is back and it's a similar lineup, me and Eric Chavez finally found something to agree on, which is lead Juan Soto off. And when I brought it up to Mendy, he thought I was freaking crazy. Anyhow, I thought that was very, very interesting. But I think the biggest takeaway from that whole discussion was literally Eric Chavez talking about changing Juan Soto's approach, which no one wants to hear. Now, let's get to grading these relievers. But before we do, why don't we celebrate our highlights with Mio's Sparkling Sake, a true crowd pleaser, light, bubbly, and easy to enjoy. Whether you're at Citi Field or your favorite spot, ask for Mio Sparkling Sake by name. A new tradition served chilled, imported from Japan, the official sake of Rico Brogna. Enjoy responsibly. So we've graded.
Question for you.
Yes.
Did you celebrate the Mio Sake after the Jets covered the points today in London?
I'm not a loser who celebrates covering. I only celebrate wins, and my team doesn't win games. So I do not celebrate covering a freaking number. I celebrate winning, okay? Which they don't do, which nobody I root for does. And that's just the reality I live in. Oh, I will say, before I watched the Jets lose, I watched the Brooklyn Nets in China, and I'll tell you, we got some good young players. Danny Wolf excites me.
You have the best Cam in town, baby.
And we got the best Cam in town, Cameron Boucher Thomas. All right, let's grade these relievers. So we've already graded position players. We've graded the starting pitchers, and on our last episode, 567, we graded the bullpen guys that came up and down. So we've got 10 guys that I would say were I guess they were the firm guys that were always around. They were the more consistent relievers on this team, or at least they intended to be the consistent relievers on this team. So let's start off with one guy who did not last, and that was Danny Young. Remember Danny Young? You guys remember Danny Young? Danny Young, of course, was on the team the previous year as well. He only ended up making 10 appearances this year, 8 1/3 innings, pitched to a 4.32 ERA. I was ready to dump him pretty early on. Danny Young is easily going to get a C-, probably a D. You know what? D+ for Danny Young. It was short. It didn't last very long, and it was brief. So Danny Young, you get a D. Let's get to A.J. Minter. A.J. Minter, does anyone remember that A.J. Minter is on the New York Mets? Have we forgotten about this? And he has a player option, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. So A.J. Minter was coming off an injury a year ago, and that slowed down his spring training. And we took it very slowly with him. There was a thought that he was actually going to start the year on the injured list, maybe miss the first week and a half, but eventually broke north, or I guess in the case of Houston, broke west with the team. And A.J. Minter was pretty good. He only made 13 appearances through 11 innings, pitched to a 1.64 ERA. He was mostly effective, and then unfortunately went down with, the Tommy John. So assuming Minter picks up his player option, which I think he will, because why would he go into free agency off an injury like this? We will get another crack at A.J. Minter. But this is a bad grade, not for being ineffective, not for being bad, just for being hurt. And I've said this on previous Ricos. I know it's not his fault, but I'm trying to think of like a school example. If I got terrible grades, I got great grades, but after 2 weeks, I got mono, and I couldn't show up to school for 3 months, and then I never finished the semester and never got to take my Regents exam, my teacher ain't giving me a good grade just because for 2 weeks I got A's on my history test. So A.J. Minter, hopefully you'll get a chance to recoup this, but I'm going to give you a C- for A.J. Minter. He pitched well, but it was not long enough. Where do you fall, Hoff, on the grading of A.J. Minter, who, yes, most people are nodding their head right now saying, oh, that's right, he's on the Mets, I forgot.
I got to be honest, even Danny Young too, man, I would say, even though Danny Young wasn't great, A.J. Minter, when he pitched, was really good. 0 home runs allowed for both of them. So I take that as a win in my book. Limited walks, which is fantastic. In the 11 innings he pitched, only 5 walks, 14 strikeouts. I mean, he did his job, only gave up 2 earned runs. I mean, the numbers were great. Just the fact that you're right, his availability was the biggest issue with him this year, and it's going to be a big issue going into next year because he's going to return halfway through the season.
I think he's going to miss a little bit of time to begin the year. They haven't given us a specific timetable. I'm going to guess June would be my prediction, assuming he's still here and coming back. But look, we saw this with Brooks Raley this year, who we're going to get to in a little bit. You can come back from a major injury and still be helpful for this team. By the way, I am going in a specific order with these relievers. I'm going with fewest appearances to the most appearances. So Danny Young made 10. A.J. Minter made 13. Let's go to the next in this group, and that is a guy who I know everyone's going to scream F as soon as I say his name, but we have to give it some thought. This guy made 22 appearances through 20 innings and pitched to a 7.20 ERA and took 3 losses. His name is Ryan Helsley. Pete, your initial reaction to Ryan Helsley and what we should grade him?
The initial trade was an A+. The performances were F sharps, or F flats, whatever we can give. I'm trying to go musical notes now, changing it up a little bit. He was talented.
Ryan Helsley was Billy Taylor. For those that remember Billy Taylor, who they acquired in 1999 from the Oakland Athletics. He was this closer who was pretty good for his team, who came here and fell flat on his face. Here's the difference, because Ryan Helsley's an F, right? He's an F. He closed strong. And I want to at least acknowledge that before we give him a terrible grade. After he gave up a couple of runs to the Phillies when they lost 11-3 and got trounced in game 3 of that 4-game series in Philly, he followed it up with a scoreless inning against Texas, a scoreless inning against San Diego, a scoreless inning against the Nationals, in which he actually came into a relatively close game, a scoreless inning against the Nationals in a close game, 2 scoreless innings against the Cubbies when they were trying to save their beaten bullpen. And in game 162, He pitched the 7th inning and pitched a scoreless inning. So I almost want to move up the F to like a D because of the way that he actually contributed in his last 6 appearances. Am I being too nice by saying that? Like his last 7 innings as a New York Met, he didn't give up any runs. And some of those games were big games, and some of those innings were important innings. So I'm not giving him a good grade, okay? I'm just saying I'm moving the F to a D- based on the finish to his season.
Can you give him like an F plus? I feel like that'd be better. I feel like that people would buy into that more. I know you can't give F pluses, but I feel like I'd buy into it for Helsley.
Yeah.
Like he was trending upwards, but he still gets an F, dude.
Yeah, he was awful.
Listen, I know record-wise, like he only has 3 losses on his record books for the games he blew, but he legitimately blew every opportunity for the Mets. He made them not make the playoffs. Like he could have been a good pitcher in the playoffs. We don't know because he sucks so much.
Yes. I mean, if the Mets made the playoffs, he was going to get that chance to rearrange his story because he could have built on his, progress that he was making, but we never got that. And by the way, don't underestimate 3 losses. That's a lot. I mean, he came here in late July. He lost 3 games in 2 months as a relief pitcher. I mean, it's freaking bad. You know what? Maybe I'm going back to F. I was being generous. Now I'm going back to an F. Let's get to Gregory Soto. Gregory Soto was another guy acquired by the brilliant David Stearns right before the trade deadline. Gregory made 25 appearances, 24 innings pitched to a 4.5 ERA. Here's the complicated part about Gregory Soto. And believe it or not, it actually is complicated. So they get him. He makes his debut on July 27th. In his first 12 2/3 innings, he allows 2 runs. I mean, he was really, really good in the month of August upon the trade. Got a few holds, got a few wins. Like he was pitching really, really well. And then September was just an out-and-out disaster. And I think that's what really changed his time here. But at first, he was actually pitching well. I mentioned how good his numbers were. In his final 11 1/3 innings, he gave up 20 hits, 10 runs, 2 home runs, pitched to a 7.94 ERA. So it was almost the tale of 2 tenures for Gregory Soto. It started off well. It ended terribly. It's in the Ds. I'm not going to give him a full F because he did give you some contributions right after the trade. But I'm going to go with like a D plus for Gregory Soto. His final numbers, a 4.5 ERA. He too lost 3 games. So Ryan Helsley lost 3 games. Gregory Soto lost 3 games. We just found 6 losses from relievers that were acquired by David Stearns. And by the way, we're not done yet. So that number is going to grow. So I'm going to give a D plus to Gregory Soto for his time here. What about you, Pete?
Yeah, I don't think I can go much higher than a D plus because I think these bullpen arms failed so bad, the ones that they acquired at the deadline. You're adding on more losses to this team. You did worse with them than without them. So you got to be D plus. I'm sorry.
The next one is a complicated figure. He made 28 appearances for the New York Mets, also after being acquired via trade. 27 1/3 innings, a 2.30 ERA, but he too lost 3 games. So think about that. 3 from Helsley, 3 from Soto, 3 from this guy. That's 9 losses from relievers that you acquired at the trade deadline. And of course, I'm talking about Tyler Rogers. I think the ERA is very misleading. I think he was worse than that. He gave up a lot of inherited runners. Mendy made the mistake of going to him with guys on base. He struck nobody out. And look, Tyler Rogers is not a big strikeout guy. I understand that. He's a pitch to contact guy. But just to give you perspective on how few he struck out batters on, with San Francisco, he struck out 6.8 guys per 9 innings. And that's right around his career average, which is 6.5. With the Mets, it was half that, 3.3. So his strikeouts went from, sure, not a strikeout pitcher, to, oh my God, he doesn't strike anybody out. And so I think the ERA is very misleading. He allowed a lot of inherited runners to score. I'm giving him a C. Like, I'll give him a better grade than Soto and a better grade than Ryan Helsley, but I can't give him a great grade. I'm going to give a straight C to Tyler Rogers.
Now, do you know how many inherited runners he had? Is there a way we can find that out?
You know, I love looking at stats and I love looking at Baseball Reference. Finding inherited runners stranded and inherited runners scored is not easy to find, which bothers me because it's one of those reliever stats that I think is really important. ERA is a very misleading stat. So if anyone knows a good website that tracks that, let me know. TheRicoB@gmail.com, because it matters. It's an important reliever stat.
It does. And that's the thing is, like, I remember early on when they brought these relievers in and they traded for them, and there'd be situations where they try to stretch out, whether it was Clay Holmes or whether maybe it was Manaya or whomever they were trying to stretch out. And, you know, all of a sudden the bases are loaded and they're like, oh, shoot, we just couldn't get out of the inning. All right, bring in Tyler Rogers. He'll get it out. He's a ground ball pitcher, or, you know, he gets easy outs all the time. And what's the first thing he does? He throws a pitch over the plate, and a guy drives in a run. And then there goes the lead, and then the game's over before you know it. And it's like, what just happened here? And that was consistent with Tyler Rogers. And that was consistent with Carlos Mendoza going to Tyler Rogers in those spots, which is why I said over and over and over, when you're in those situations, when you start to get to like a fourth or fifth inning with some of these guys that completely go upside down, you go batter by batter because you have no go-to reliever. So unfortunately to me, Tyler Rogers gets a D+ because he was the guy they kept on going to and he kept failing.
So the average inherited runners that score percentage in Major League Baseball is 32%. The New York Mets had the seventh highest in terms of guys scoring, which is a negative stat. Not stranded, scored. That's how Baseball Reference has it. And they were at 35%. Worst team in baseball were the Atlanta Braves and the Washington Nationals, just to give you some perspective. Because that's the other thing about inherited runners stranded or inherited runners scored, however you want to look at it. We don't really know the good percentage right off the top of your head. You need context. So at least that's the context of it. The worst team in baseball allowed about 40% of the inherited runners to score. The best team in baseball, the Houston Astros, kept it at 24%. All right, next up on our grade list is Brooks Raley. Brooks Raley ended up making 30 appearances, fifth most on the team, 25 2/3 innings, pitched to a 2.45 ERA. Unlike the other guys we mentioned, he only lost one game. He won 3. Not that that's an important stat. Brooks Raley was amazing. I mean, Brooks Raley was freaking awesome. And if it was more than 30 appearances, because 30 is less than half a season, and I get it, he was coming off Tommy John. If this was a full season, he'd be in line to get an A. But because it was such kind of a brief part of the year, though it was an important part of the year, I'm going to bring him down to a B, but I'm going to give him a B+. Because I thought Brooks Raley, outside of Edwin Diaz, was their pound for pound most trusted reliever throughout this season. And it kind of came out of nowhere because when the Mets signed him, I remember we talked about it on the Rico and said, hey, good signing, got nothing to lose. But we weren't sure what to expect from him. He did not make his debut for this team until, what was the exact date he made his debut? I'll tell you right now. It was actually on July 19th. Think about that. He basically was a trade deadline acquisition. He made his debut only a week before Gregory Soto made his debut. And he was awesome. Like, outside of the Mariner game, the first game of that 3-game series against Seattle where Helsley blew it and then Brooks Raley blew it, he was actually so good that was his worst performance. Like, I can't even really think of like a bad performance outside of that. In fact, he made 30 appearances. He only allowed a run in 4 of them. So 26 of 30, he was scoreless. It was unfortunate that they weren't really able to use him on back-to-backs at first. Eventually, Mendy did. He got lefties out. He got righties out. Brooks Raley was fantastic. And I guess you could yell at me and say I should do better than a B+. I'm only going to keep it below an A because it was just a third of the season or a half of the season. But I'm going to give Brooks Raley a very strong B+ for his performance.
Yeah, but I would definitely say because you can't say it's a third of a season because for relief pitchers, 30 games, that's about half the season for them.
It's more than a third. Look, he made his debut July 19th. You're about 110 games into the season at that point. So I'll do the math. it's better than that, but it's not. It's less than half a season. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okay, that's fine. But still, I don't care about the length, because we saw like Helsley came in, and if he would have pitched good, if Helsley would have been pitched the way we wanted him to pitch for the 2 months, he would have gotten an A. You know, like if the expectation was what they were what we had when they first came in, it would be an A, and he probably would have only had he had 20 starts, whatever it was with Helsley. So I think really the fact that we were able to get him back, to keep him to sign him midway through the season, or was it early in the season, right, that we signed him for, right?
We signed him earlier. It just took a while for him to rehab and eventually come back, and then he made his debut in July.
I think he did an amazing job. His whip was .78, dude. That's freaking that's amazing. So I'll take him any day. I think that he was one of the, again, like you said, he was up there with Edwin Diaz as one of the most reliable closers or bullpen arms. So I'm going to give him an A-. I'll give him that A that you won't do. Only for freaking Torrens.
Yeah, only Torrens. That's it. I'm a weird marker. What can I tell you? We've got 4 more relievers left. These are the guys who made the most appearances out of the bullpen for the New York Mets this season. And one of them is not on the team and wasn't on the team at the end of the year, and that's Jose Butto. Jose Butto was here. He was, of course, included in the Tyler Rogers trade. He ended up making 34 appearances, 47 innings, 3.64 ERA. The value of Jose Butto is the multi-inning, go steal me a bunch of outs kind of value. So he wasn't great when he was here, but think about the amount of games Jose Butto came into and needed to get more than 3 outs. It happened a lot. And when you're going to your bullpen frequently, not that the Mets needed to as badly early in the season, though they did it a lot. Like, even though they were getting better starting pitching, it's not like they were getting 7 or 8 innings out of their starters. I thought Butto added a value in being a multi-inning pitcher. Was he great? No, he wasn't great. I thought he was okay. I thought he was decent. I thought he was your typical 5th or 6th reliever in a bullpen. So I'm going to give him a C+. Like, I don't think he was bad by any stretch. I wasn't mad when they dealt him. I kind of looked at him being in that trade as a necessary evil. It would have been better to keep him just because of the value he provided. And think about some of the other relievers the Mets went through over the course of the season. But I think it's just disappointing because when Jose Butto was moved to the bullpen a year ago, he pitched so well. I mean, he was the Rico Brogna Rookie of the Year a year ago. And so for him to just turn into average, never get an opportunity to re-enter the starting rotation, we talked about that a lot. And now he's in San Francisco, where we know what's going to happen. 2 years from now, he's going to be a finalist for the Cy Young Award. He's going to be converted into a starter. It's going to be Seth Lugo all over again. So it's more disappointing it didn't work out with him. But I'm going to give Jose Butto a C+.
So in the 47 innings he pitched for the Mets, he only had 2 losses. Unlike Tyler Rogers, Ryan Helsley, and Gregory Soto. You're right. He's disappointing because I think there was a lot of optimism with him that he was going to be that almost rubber band guy, go back and forth between starter and bullpen. Just never. Like you, I wasn't upset when he got traded. Like, it didn't disappoint me at all. I'd give him a C because it was somewhere in the middle. Like, he wasn't too good. He definitely wasn't too good, but he also wasn't bad enough. He was just okay.
This reliever I'm about to tell you is going to get the most grades all over the place. I could see the arguments for people saying he deserves a C or a D, and even the arguments that he deserves an A or a B. It's rare that you get that, but I'll explain why Reed Garrett is all over the place. Now, before we get into the numbers, right off the top of your head off, if I just said, don't think about it, don't overthink it, just grade Reed Garrett, what would be the first grade that comes to mind?
I am not as much of a hater as Reed Garrett as some other people, but I do think there's 2 splits. Obviously, he got hurt, so that hurt him. But I would say for the first third of the first month or 2 of the season, he was up there as like a B+, maybe even an A-.
Yeah. It extends even further. So Reed Garrett ended up making 58 appearances. He finished with a 3.9 ERA. From the beginning of the season until August 9th, he made 49 appearances, pitched to a 2.45 ERA. And if you combine saves and holds as one stat, he got 23 of those with 5 blown saves. Not bad. I mean, I'm not saying he's the greatest of all time, but it was not bad. And you think about some of the big outs he got, some of the big strikeouts he got. I think back to that Yankee series at Yankee Stadium, the Saturday game. He was, outside of Diaz, their most reliable reliever. It's almost like Reed Garrett and Brooks Raley were like a tag. They tagged one in, tagged one out. Because we talked about how good Raley was from July 19th on. Well, from the beginning of the season until August, that was Reed Garrett. And then he got hurt. And you mentioned it. And it was before he got hurt where the struggles began. Then he got hurt. Then he came back, and he was abysmal upon his return. That last game against the Phillies in Philadelphia, I think, will jump out at us. And his last 9 appearances, he blew 2 saves, didn't get a hold, didn't get a save, and pitched to a 12.91 ERA. And to me, that it blew up his stats, blew up his season. And because it was such an important time in the year, I think we remember it the most. We're not going to necessarily think back fondly on the game he got big outs in May and June. So I think that's what makes him complicated. It in a weird way reminds me of David Peterson when we were grading him. I had a very difficult time giving David Peterson a terrible grade because as bad as his final numbers were, for 80% of the season, he was their most reliable starter. To just throw that out because of the abysmal final month it's not fair necessarily. The great example I'd give is you're an A student. And then May comes around and I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you're partying too much and you get straight Fs. And now your final average is a 72. Anyone who knew you as a student would say, he's better than a 72. He just had a horrible final month. Too much of the drugs, too much of the booze, too much of the girls and the guys, like too much partying.
Whoa.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, I'm going to give Reed Garrett a B-. Like a B is still a solid grade. I think it would be higher if he was able to finish strong, but obviously that stuff brings him down. So final grade for Reed, who also, he too had Tommy John surgery, right? Like I'm losing track on all the people that needed Tommy John.
Well, and here's the thing too, like you think about it, he had 58 games appeared in, right? I feel like a lot of those were in the first few months of the season, like where he was just being used every day. And I think that this is and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just, reading too much into this. But the fact that the starting pitchers could only go 4 or 5 innings on a regular basis, and they had to use their best relievers to try to win games as best as possible, they literally fell apart. Literally, figuratively, they completely fell apart mentally, and they broke down. And that's why they had to get Tommy John.
Yeah, Reed Garrett's having Tommy John, and it happened so late because he's had the Tommy John a few days ago. He's going to miss 2026. So there isn't this return thought of, he may be back in August or September, the Brooks Raley edition. Not going to be the case for Reed Garrett, so we wish him all the best. 2 more guys left. One, let's just get out of the way. It's easy, is Edwin Diaz. We already gave Edwin Diaz the Rico Brogna MVP and the Rico Brogna, reliever of the year. I mean, he cleaned up during our award show, which you could check out on the archives of the Rico. He had a great year. 62 appearances, 66 and a third, 1.63 ERA. He was almost as good as he was in 2022. It's very difficult to match that kind of season, but he was close. So Edwin's an A+. And going all the way with a plus, feels like a lot, but I think he deserves it. I think he was the most dominant closer in baseball. And I shudder to think what this season would have been like if Edwin Diaz wasn't like existing, or if he was just mediocre. Like they needed him. They needed every morsel of Edwin Diaz, and that's why I go all the way and I give him an A+.
Yeah, that's fine. There's no fight there. I'm just shocked that you gave somebody an A+ and it wasn't Luis Torrens. Sorry, I'm just gonna keep on.
I didn't give Torrens an A+. I gave him like an A- or something.
You gave him an A. It doesn't make a difference. You gave him one of the highest grades in anybody on the team.
Not as high as Edwin Diaz. And finally, the guy who led the team in appearances, made 65 appearances for the Mets in 2025 through 56 innings, pitched to a 5.30 ERA, and won a bunch of net negatives this season on our series-ending awards, and that's Ryan Stanek. Ryan Stanek was mostly bad. That's how I would describe him. Were there some good moments? Sure. Were there some moments where you said, Ryan Stanek's back in the circle of trust? Absolutely. But for the most part, he wasn't good. I'm not going to go as bad as a D. as an F as we gave the Ryan Helsleys of the world. I would say it's a C minus for Ryan Stanek. I was about to give him a D, but no, I'm going to go C minus for Stanek because the value I will give him is that he took the baseball and he was there. And, we talked about a lot of relievers that missed time, that were injured, that were on the IL. Ryan Stanek was always there. And so I think the term you used earlier was posting. Ryan Stanek posted. Now, am I done with Ryan Stanek? Yes. Are we all done with what was affectionately labeled by a Rico listener as Fat Thor? Yes. But I'll improve his grade into the C's just because of the reliability of being able to take the baseball. But it was a mostly bad year for Ryan Stanek.
I can't do that because look at his games, 65 games. He didn't even give you 65 innings pitched. He gave you 56, meaning 9 of those games. Remember, they're supposed to pitch. He's probably coming into an inning. He's supposed to see 3 batters, right? That's what the logic is. Nowadays, you bring in a relief pitcher, you're supposed to see 3 batters. That means that he went about 9 games where he couldn't effectively get outs. Like whether it was it one full inning that he couldn't get a single out? Could he get only 1 or 2? He wasn't doing his job at all. His ERA is a 5.3. His WHIP is 1.57. You're telling me that, yes, he was eating innings. He was taking the ball, but it wasn't productive. It was like he was pitching in all those 70 losses that we couldn't come back from.
He had a very inconsistent year. Like in March and April, he had a 5.06 ERA. In May, he had a 1.04 ERA. In June, he had a 6.23 ERA. In July, it was down to 2.79. In August, it was 12.38. And then in September, it was 5.23. So it was a little bit all over the place. I think we're all kind of done with Ryan Stanek. I think we're all ready to move on. Not a great year. And I think overall, when you look at this bullpen, what they lacked after Diaz was the consistency. You had some good moments from Reed Garrett, at least most of the season. You had some good moments late in the year from Brooks Raley, but you had a lot of up and downs, a lot of guys on the Syracuse train, which we talked about on the last edition. I think what this bullpen really missed was H.A. Minter, and it missed reliability because outside of Edwin Diaz, it just did not have a lot of that over the course of this season. And it needs to be better in 2026. And trust me, we will spend a lot of time on how David Stearns should build this bullpen. Did I just say the name David Stearns? Oh, he's next because we've graded the position players. We've graded the starters. We've graded the Syracuse train bullpen arms. And we graded the bullpen. Next up, we grade David Stearns and his little friend Carlos Mendoza. That sounds so mean that I said it that way. But we're going to grade them next. Also next week on the Rico Brogna, we will do a deep dive on how the Mets somehow managed to not come from behind when trailing after 8 innings, and also a Juan Soto deep dive. So we got a lot coming up on the Rico Brogna, but there are playoff games going on right now, and I've got a pick to make. And, of course, our pick is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. I think I'm 7-6 overall in my picks, as Dan has emailed me and notified me, which I do appreciate. Let me look at this NLCS. So I think the Dodgers are winning the NLCS. I think we all agree with that, but they are heavy favorites. I'm going to take the under on how long this series goes, okay? And by the way, I don't mean to be a jerk-off.
No,
I have to correct you because on the YouTube, there's a graphic, and he's saying Dodgers over Cubs. I've got bad news, Hoff. The Brewers beat them. Abner Uribe did not pull a Devin Williams and blow a 2-run lead in the 9th inning. So the Dodger-Brewers series, which is a rematch of the 2018 NLCS, which went 7, which was a great series. I don't think this is going 7. I think this is going to be a short series. And so I'm going to take the under on the length of the series, which is 5.5. And the under is also plus 132. So you win a couple of shekels that way. I hope I'm wrong here because at this point as a baseball fan, I want to be entertained. That's really what I'm rooting for. When I was watching the extra inning game between the Tigers and Mariners, I said, dance for me, just entertain me. Same thing with the ALCS. I just want to be entertained. So it's one of those things I kind of hope I'm wrong, but I believe the under on the series at 5.5. We appreciate you listening to the Rico Brogna. Remember, download, subscribe so you never miss another edition. We've been giving you Ricos like every 3 days. We pop them out like we're going to the bathroom every night. That's an analogy. Thank you very much for listening to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.